This presentation will reflect on my badminton session which took place in week 3. I will highlight what I did well within the session and how I can improve my teaching practice in the future. I will also reflect on the teaching style which I adopted in order to teach badminton. By recognising my faults within this session helps me to improve my skills and knowledge of being a teacher and also supports me to recognise what I do wrong when teaching from both an observer and participant's view. Teaching is a process which is known to be complex and can be affected both positively and negatively by many different factors. Within the teaching of physical education, there are a lot of frameworks which have been thought of, trialled and reviewed. From this, there are 11 different teaching styles which are adopted through different sports. Within these teaching styles, not one of the 11 styles are better. It's how they are used to get the best teaching and learning. Many teachers will use different teaching styles depending on who the participants are and what the sport they are teaching. Within the framework, styles A to E are stated as reproduction styles, which could be known as teacher-centered instruction, and on the other end of the spectrum, F to K, are styles which are student-led by questioning and problem-solving. Some teaching styles can motivate participants to learn and focus within physical education. However, some styles can have the opposite effect on participants, which will negatively affect the session. For example, teachers may start to get behaviour issues. Badminton was our choice of sport for our physical education lesson. Badminton was chosen as we thought it was a fun, experimental sport which the majority of people can play with minimal skill. This has been backed up by Wang and Moffat as they state that everyone can reach a level of enjoyment in the game after mastering basic skills and tactics. Throughout our session, we adopted a game-based approach to teaching. However, we taught this through reciprocal teaching. Reciprocal teaching is delivered through an instructional practice. This teaching style is within the reproduction section of Mostren spectrum. Styles within this section expect students to reproduce a skills or technique which were explained. Within our PE lesson, we use a teaching style of reciprocal as the students had the responsibility to perform and generate feedback around the technique of the overhead clear. Participants also worked socially as they needed to work with others to improve and generate ideas around the technique. Furthermore, within the session, all 3 teachers were moving around the students, clarifying tasks and asking performance-based questions. Our session was game-based as we let the participants experiment through games. Research suggests that this is a safe experimental type of learning with little to no pressure. By teaching the lesson through a reciprocal game-based session meant that the participants were engaged throughout and allowed for a large amount of active learning time. Closely linked to teaching styles are learning theories. Learning theories are used to frame the practical session and how participants are learning. Throughout the badminton lesson, we taught through different dominant learning theories. We taught using cognitivism and constructivism, which enabled us to use experimental learning. Kolb's experimental learning is a process where the participants are learning through hands-on and practical. This was shown when we set them the challenge of coming up with 3 main coaching points in their first activity. This is proven to be an effective teaching practice as participants are able to apply their knowledge and the skills as well as improve their teamwork and communication. Cognitive learning is when an individual learner gains environmental data via the senses. The data is processed and organised. Thereafter, the learner can act on the world. The participants learned through this theory as they had to deconstruct the overhead clear technique into 3 main coaching points. The learners at points were passive as they were listening to instructions. However, most of the time they were active, with some participants gaining 70 shots in a 20-minute window, which shows they had good amount of active learning time, which is crucial within a PE lesson. This also links our session to the national curriculum aims, as they state that participants need to be physically active for sustained periods of time. Secondly, we taught the learners through constructivist theory. Nagawa states that this theory is actively constructed in the mind of learners out of their experience in the world. Therefore, the learning is very pupil-centered as they had to problem solve to work out the tasks which were given. Within our session, we set the participants off to work on how to perform the overhead clear. The task for the participants to think of 3 coaching points in pairs whilst playing and experimenting with different techniques. Participants also had to problem solve during the king or queen of the court to know what shot would allow them to score. Research shows that learning is more effective when participants are active and interacting with others. This was positive of our coaching as we got the participants to improve their knowledge by talking to others. Further to this, the participants then shared their ideas with the group to form a dynamic and correct technique. This extra learning is known as the zone of proximal development. Before we taught our PE lesson, we created a lesson plan. Lesson plans are used to outline the lessons, highlighting key factors such as objectives, activities, equipment, and skill development. Mostren and Ashworth states that a lesson plan is the intended learning expectations and the process for attaining them. Our lesson plan was good as it was in-depth and framed what we wanted the participants to do. Lesson plans are also a huge part of being prepared for a lesson. Our lesson was planned to be fun and engaging. This took a while to figure out as you need to take into consideration your participants' abilities. Differentiation was used within our plan as we were unsure of the ability levels. Therefore, within each activity, we had a normal game, a more difficult condition, and then if participants were struggling, we had a simplified suggestion too. This meant the lesson was able to flow and every participant would be active as well as achieving. Within the PE lesson at university, we had a clear objective of all will understand the overhead clear in badminton. Objectives are also known as stepping stones to meet long-term intentions within sport. Objectives are usually stated at the start of the lesson to describe what pupils should achieve by the end of the session. Regarding our objectives, we set a bronze, silver and gold objective, which we wanted everyone to at least meet bronze by the end of the lesson. Our objective was very broad and not necessarily specific. To improve our objectives, we could look at including a direct link to the curriculum content or linking the objectives to other subjects, such as English. This is now widely used within schools. Major within Young states that objectives should provide clear information to the students about where they are heading and what is expected of them. I would suggest that our objectives were unmeasurable as there was no way of measuring whether the participants had improved by the end of the lesson. Therefore, for our future objectives, we need to make them measurable. For example, we could have our objective as identify 3 key coaching points of the overhead clear and be able to show 3 attempts of using the shot in gameplay. This is then specific to the sport and has a clear outcome. Furthermore, one peer stated, I forgot what the objectives were by the end and don't think they were revisited. From this, next time I teach a session with objectives, I need to ensure that I revisit the aims throughout as well as at the end. By emphasising the aims within the session helps to keep the participants on track as they are aware of what they are being asked to do. By stating the objectives at the end can show whether the students have learned and met the objectives which were set. Within our session, we used poor terminology such as good job and great work, but the participants didn't necessarily understand what they were doing well and meant the feedback was non-specific. When giving students feedback, it should be direct and specific. For example, instead of good job, I could have stated excellent positioning of your body when you did that shot, or you did an amazing job remembering all 3 key coaching points. This enables the participant to understand what they are doing well rather than just a general comment. Feedback should be specific to the participant. Mostyn and Ashworth state that non-specific comments are sometimes appropriate. However, these comments can often lead to misunderstanding, which can result in poor performance, behaviour, and can affect the participants' feelings. Therefore, within my next teaching session, I will try to give the participants more specific and beneficial feedback to enable suitable progression. Within PE lessons, you need to show inclusivity. Within my session, we showed inclusivity when we put the group into mixed pairs for our competitive game of King or Queen of the Court. The group was paired by the weakest and the strongest performers working together. To do this, we asked the participants to self-evaluate their performance. This was how we matched the participants in the end. By telling participants to work together makes the pairings fair and allows the weaker participants to improve by watching and playing with more able participants. This also made the games inclusive. Furthermore, I tried to build relationships throughout the session. Relationships are important as help to make the participants feel more comfortable, which can later improve confidence to engage fully within a PE lesson. This is also meeting one of the national curriculum aims of developing competence to excel in physical activity. In conclusion, my overall session was well planned, but to be more successful, I need to use all the suggestions from above to improve and increase participation success rate. Reciprocal teaching is important within sport, and in my opinion, I enjoy teaching in this way as it gives the participants some time to experiment. Pittsey et al. States that reciprocal teaching increases intrinsic motivation and increases enjoyment. However, on the other hand, reciprocal teaching is preferred by female participants over male. Therefore, this may affect when I use this teaching style in further teaching opportunities. Another importance in teaching is active learning. Active learning provides participants time to experiment with different techniques and talk about the techniques. Emphasis and improves teamwork and builds self-esteem. Therefore, I will use this within my future teaching as I believe participants learn more by doing and practicing over being spoken to and told what to do. Thank you.